X-Men Apocalypse is the third movie using the younger cast, but it's the ninth or so official X-Men movie since the debut of the X-Men in 2000. Now, I don't love any of the X-Men movies, and with the exception of Deadpool, which is barely an X-Men movie, I wouldn't say I really care for any of them. I'm aware that the first is well regarded for breaking ground on the superhero movie landscape, and that X2 is usually regarded as the best of the original trilogy, before it fell apart in The Last Stand and the Origins Wolverine movie. Then came the reboot of First Class, another highly regarded X-Men movie, but one that I still haven't seen all the way through, so that one's my bad. And Days of Future Past, which was the most financially successful of the X-Men movies, and reset the timeline that was already muddled and confusing at this point. All that said, I had always found the X-Men movies chock full of wasted potential. I liked some of the ideas they dealt with, and I loved the casting of both Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, but I always found that the actual movies focused on the wrong parts of what I wanted to see, like by having Rogue be one of our main characters for much of the original trilogy, or by leaving out some of the most fun mutants and the more colorful uniforms reminiscent of the 90s television show. So headed into X-Men Apocalypse, I was still waiting to fall in love with one of these X-Men movies, and for about 45 minutes I thought I had. I was in love with the opening scene in Egypt. I found the world they developed fascinating and loved Apocalypse and his horsemen especially. When the humans turned on them and set forth their plan to kill all of them, I found the horsemen's dedication to protecting Apocalypse incredibly moving. They were all completely on board with giving their own lives to something bigger than themselves, since Apocalypse had built himself up as a god to them. I found all of these implications intriguing, and I was wishing I could have seen more of them in some way. But they worked great in their parts, and they made Apocalypse's disappearance from the world plausible and unique. After this, we fast forward to 1983, and we're introduced to a number of new and old faces, as well as some new faces for some old names. We get to meet new Cyclops and witness the origin of his powers. He's already more of a character than James Marsden's cock-blocking Cyclops ever was. New Cyclops is a sarcastic bad boy who actually brings some life to the character. Plus, we get to see Xavier's school, which is only a school at the moment, as Professor X is still against the idea of raising an army under his roof. We also see new Jean Grey, or Sansa Stark from Game of Thrones. She and Cyclops have a great meeting that sets up some of Jean's powers, as well as their relationship for movies to come in a rather humorous way. Jubilee is there too, in a bright yellow jacket, and that's about all we learn or see from her for the entire movie. I don't even know what her mutant powers were. New Nightcrawler and new Angel are both introduced in a cage fight. Angel's wings seem incredibly capable at first, as he writes a tally on the floor, but that's pretty much the most he does with them all movie. Nightcrawler looks like he did in X2, except younger, and he's still cool as he teleports all over the place. He is mostly used as comedic relief in this movie, though, but unfortunately that just means he's loud during the quieter moments. He doesn't even really make jokes. For example, after a tense scene is coming to a close, he wakes up abruptly yelling and then says, "What did I miss?" Everything. Go back to bed, you idiot. I did grow to like the team of Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Jean, though. I loved their chemistry. Unfortunately, they were a small part of this stuffed movie. Professor X, Mystique, Beast, and Magneto are all back. X and Magneto are both fantastic, as Fassbender and McAvoy have really settled into these characters, but yet still managed to find interesting things to explore with them. Mystique and Beast are fine. Jen Lawrence is a huge draw now, and she gets a huge chunk of screen time going through the same crisis we see Mystique go through in every movie. Who am I? Why do I have to hide? Oh, I shouldn't hide. I should embrace my mutant self. Yeah, we know. We've seen this all before. And Beast, who's primarily there as a romantic opposite for Mystique, although that never really goes anywhere. And he's also the school's tech guy, so he does both of those things adequately, although he did build a giant plane under the school that ended up blowing up the entire school when Havoc lost his mind and tried blowing Apocalypse's head off, which, best case scenario, would probably have killed Professor X. So after quite a while, we return to Apocalypse, who is just now being unearthed and awoken by the power of sunlight. Apocalypse awakes after centuries in confusion to the world around him. It isn't until he meets Storm, who is basically Aladdin with a gang of street kids, that he's able to absorb a television and learn everything he can about the world. He sees a world inherited by the weak who betrayed him so long ago, and he vows to rule himself. But first he needs his horsemen, and so he enlists Storm to the cause with the promise of amplifying her powers and some sweet new highlights. Next up, he goes to the seedy underground mutant hangout and meets Psylocke. He likes the cut of her jib, and he grabs her as his second horseman, gives her the most ill-fitting codpiece he can find for her swanky new outfit. At this point, I was still totally on board for all of Apocalypse boasting and world-ending speeches. And then we got to a great scene with a broken angel whose wings are not only restored, but enhanced with metal in a grotesque but intense transformation that ends with him shooting metal spikes from his new wings. Something I can't remember him ever doing in any of his fights. Unfortunately, this is the last time these Horseman characters really do anything other than stand around and design their costumes. And fight in the third act, of course, before they are all easily dispatched. It's really disappointing because I really liked the setup they had for Storm and Psylocke and Angel. I was totally invested and I wanted to see what they were going to do with them. And then they didn't. They just didn't. It's like Apocalypse just met the first 3 mutants he could get his hands on, and he just enlisted their help primarily because he loves designing costumes. I mean, there's a whole scene where Xavier and Magneto are talking in Magneto's head, and Apocalypse is just designing costumes in the background. I think that's his real calling, though. I mean, they all looked great, they just didn't do anything. Well, now Apocalypse just needs one more Horseman, and this time he's actually going to get a powerful mutant instead of just one of the first people he meets. He wants Magneto, but Eric has given up the mutant fight and he's living like a human. He lives with his wife and daughter in the woods around no metal, but because he is hilariously ironic, he works in a metal factory. Unfortunately, one day he's exposed as Magneto after he saves the life of a human, and this leads to cops showing up at his house. Although he does eventually agree to go with them, one of the cops accidentally shoots off an arrow and kills both Magneto's wife and daughter with the same arrow. I mean, props to this movie because it had balls to do this. There's then a great moment where he kills every one of the cops using only his daughter's necklace, and then screams about who he is and what God's will was. But Fassbender actually makes it sound heartfelt rather than as cringeworthy as it could sound. Magneto's at his lowest point, and this is when Apocalypse recruits him. He helps him destroy Auschwitz and enhance his powers as well, and boom, Apocalypse has his 4 horsemen. This is where the movie really lost its steam. I felt that they did a great job of setting up Apocalypse and the Horsemen and our heroes. Unfortunately, they had a real difficult time knocking these things down. Next up, Xavier contacts Magneto through Cerebro, but this only allows Apocalypse to control all of the world's nuclear weapons. He initiates all of them to shoot straight up in the air. But in this very crucial moment, they decide to go ahead and throw in the Stan Lee cameo. I mean, it just completely took me out of the movie. It couldn't have been more jarring, and it was in such a weird place tonally. But instead of the nukes falling back down on the Earth and creating an apocalypse, they just float off into space. I was completely lost. I mean, this is classic 2 birds, 1 stone situation. I mean, does he or doesn't he want an apocalypse? Apocalypse makes way to kidnap Xavier and then teleports out of there before Havoc blows everything up. But don't worry, because Deus Ex Quicksilver is never too far out of the way. In what was a clear rehashing of the great Quicksilver scene from the last movie, Quicksilver goes to work saving everyone inside the mansion as he runs to a catchy song. The only problem with this scene is that it is tonally out of whack. We're meant to be having a good time and laughing it up, but this is a crucial moment for all our heroes and countless other kids. So it's hard to keep that out of my mind as I watch Quicksilver run around with a pizza dog. Luckily, he gets everyone out, except Havoc, who is Cyclops' brother, and he's sad about it for a bit, and then again later in the movie. But that's it. I mean, he isn't really angry at Apocalypse. I mean, he doesn't really have a right to, since his brother kind of killed himself. But either way, after the explosion, new Stryker kidnaps all the main characters and leaves all the kids. Kids who we never revisit until the end of the movie, so I guess they just hang out by some rebel. But Stryker takes everyone up to Canada. Luckily, though, Jean Grey finds a cage with an animal, and she decides, might as well let it go and see what happens. Out jumps Wolverine in full Weapon X attire, and he goes nuts on every person in the bunker. This was by far one of the most visceral and brutal action sequences for Wolverine in any of the X-Men movies or his solo adventures. And there's a great moment between him and Jean just before he runs off into the woods, which was kind of comical, I can't lie. I felt like they held the camera on him a little too much. But just before that, Jean Grey is able to return a part of his past to him. And this kind of sets up You know, their little love triangle they had in the original trilogy, at least. So everyone escapes and hops in a plane to wherever Apocalypse is because, you know, his name. And because Magneto is murdering millions and turning buildings into strings of flying rubble all over the world. Because that's so much easier than dropping nukes on the Earth. Or using Cerebro, which Apocalypse was already in control of, to kill all the humans in the world, which I guess was too close to the plot of X-Men 2 for his liking. So the final battle starts, and it's fine. Angel isn't really a threat to anybody, and he never shoots his metal wings. And because apparently all mutants are incredibly ironic, he dies in a plane crash. Oh darn, if only he could fly. If only his only mutation allowed him to fly. Poor guy. Psylocke 2 fights with Beast for a while in a pretty underwhelming battle. Her only real cool moment was spoiled in 1,000 TV spots and trailers when she cuts through a car in midair. I really can't remember anything else she did besides giving the camera a knowing look before she walks out of the movie. She might as well said, "I'll be back, my pretties." Storm uses some weather powers, but they don't really do much. This entire battle was just slow and boring. Not to mention, the entire thing took place over the course of like 50 yards of some random city that was completely empty of people, I guess. However, we did get a great fight scene with Quicksilver where he's just beating the tar out of Apocalypse. Until Apocalypse kind of figures him out and his eyes catch up to his speed, he ends up catching his foot with some sand, one of the many powers he seemingly forgot for large chunks of the final battle. The real turning point of the battle, though, is when Apocalypse is choking out Mystique, because this turns both Magneto and Storm against him, while he battles Xavier in his mind and the other X-Men in the real world. Although, not really. I mean, this whole battle really didn't need to happen, because the only thing that can kill Apocalypse is Deus Ex Jean Grey. All she has to do is use her power of yelling once, and the guy's skin is literally burnt off his body in a couple of seconds, because Jean Grey is awesome, and so strong, and the best, and unstoppable, and you see what I'm getting at here. This is one of the things that bother me about the original trilogy. No matter what was happening, we were always just one Jean Grey stare away from saving the whole world or destroying the whole world as we got further into the trilogy. As I'm sure we will with this Jean Grey as well. As an X-Men movie, it isn't half bad. In fact, it's easily one of my favorites. As a movie in general, it's fine.
I think this movie earned about a 5.5 out of 10. And I'm just saying that based on how many of the characters on this poster I can actually say that I had liked or had any kind of connection with.
It had a lot of potential, and it proceeded to waste all of it away. The setup was there, and they were primed for an awesome showdown. But the so-called apocalypse had so little effect after the half-dozen city destructions we get every summer now, that it just didn't affect me. Also, after Civil War, the fights in this movie feel more like kindergarten slap fights made by people who don't even understand their own characters. I would say that this movie's biggest problem is that it's about 5 years too late to really have weight to it. Not to mention that we have already seen most of these beats and characters in previous movies from this exact franchise. The good news is that we shouldn't have to endure another timeline-shifting reboot from the franchise, and that the future does look bright for the X-Men. Hopefully with the next movie we can get some fresh blood in here. I mean, Bryan Singer has run his course and hasn't really had much to say about the X-Men in quite a while. So excluding his return, there's optimism for the stories we could get in the future. And the good character work we got from the young cast like Quicksilver, Nightcrawler, Jean, and Cyclops in this movie really sets that up for the future. Plus it looks like they're finally going to embrace those awesome X-Men uniforms we saw in the final scene. So, the future is bright. That's the end of my X-Men Apocalypse review, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I've got more to come. I'm thinking I might do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 next. Also, maybe some Game of Thrones stuff coming up. We'll see where it takes me. But till then, please subscribe, like, leave a comment if you want to. I'd love to have some kind of conversation with you guys. Till then, see you next time. Bye.